following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
And welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the HighLowSports podcast. We appreciate you all joining us here on this Wednesday evening, or if you're checking us out later in the week on one of your favorite places you get your podcast from. Hopefully you enjoyed a nice, safe 4th of July weekend with all 10 fingers intact, as well as everything else. Hopefully you don't have any Jason Pierre-Pauls joining us today. It is DJ, joined as always by my co-host DJ and Kelcey. 4th of July is always fun. It's a great weekend. But it's also a really good weekend for baseball, and kind of that last weekend before the MLB All-Star break, which we have coming right around the corner.
Yeah, it's always a fun time. We always get to see the All-Stars. We get to see, in this case, the USFL championship game just wrapped up. The Gold Cup is going on this year. So it's a lot of fun times happening this year. And then, as you mentioned, the last week before the All-Star game, before the All-Star break, I should say, for MLB. So teams just got announced, and that's pretty exciting as well. Usually this year, maybe not so exciting. It might be some pretty obvious answers here, but yeah, no, it's always a great time this time of year. Always great midsummer celebration.
And not to mention too, there's hundreds of people around the world who little did they know that this was the last weekend they are going to wake up with all of their fingers intact. So hopefully anyone listening is not one of those, but definitely celebrate responsibly out there, both as far as drinking and as far as fireworks go. So that's probably enough of the opening part. I think we can go right ahead and get into the tip-off since we alluded to. So we'll go and jump right into the tip-off. The tip-off, of course, brought to you by good friends over at SeatGeek. Use code BellyUpSports. Get $20 off your first order to get some high-quality seats, maybe for that All-Star game if you are in the Pacific Northwest. But speaking of that game, the roster's officially been announced. Last week kind of talked about the voting for the starters. Right now we have the whole roster list for both teams. Not all of them are going to play. There's some injuries. There's some things like that. But we officially got the roster list. We'll wait for the official one for the game. But as we kind of take a look at it, we were just talking about a little bit ago, I think for the most part, MLB gets it right every year. I don't think they have there's obviously some snubs here, some guys that you can make a case for, but compared to other sports leagues, MLB does a pretty good job of getting the players who deserve to be in there right, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the starters. Let's not kid ourselves. They don't have the whole bench team yet released for the field, or at least for the position players. They do have your pitching reserves, but those are released Sunday. Actually, no, never mind. Sorry, they were released this last Sunday. My bad. I'm behind a week. My bad. I'm scrolling through everything, but yeah, no, it's no surprise, I guess, on a lot of these guys. It's not going to surprise anybody who's starting, who's not. I mean, I guess the biggest surprise is, will Corbin Carroll play for the NL? So yeah, it's no surprises anywhere down the line. I guess maybe if you're an idiot and haven't watched much baseball, then maybe Shohei Ohtani getting picked as a pitcher and a hitter might surprise you. But yeah, for the most part, there shouldn't be any surprises.
I feel like even if they don't watch baseball, the name Shohei Ohtani and what he's done should at least radiate a little bit. If you care enough to see who made it and how they made it, you should at least know why he did that. And just adding on to what you said too, Aaron Judge, another one who's officially a starter, but he's 99% sure he's not playing. There's a handful.
Yeah, they've already announced he'll be replaced.
So he'll be there's a handful of guys that'll probably get replaced. But as we look at this list, we'll kind of both go through it. Look at some guys that we're going to talk about. We don't want to call them snubs because that makes it sound like the people who got in there didn't deserve it. And as we just said, they kind of did. But we'll look at some guys who had some all-star caliber seasons that maybe they squeeze in if there's an injury, or maybe there's someone that they could have made it based on numbers. And I'll go ahead and lead the way for us on this one. I'm going to start in the AL, and we're going to start looking at that first base spot. So obviously we kind of both agreed last week. Yandy Diaz, 100%. Vlad Guerrero Jr., can't really argue with either one of those. But I will say, I feel like Josh Naylor made a pretty compelling case throughout the year to be an all-star. Just comparing his numbers to Yandy Diaz, obviously OPS, OPS plus, on base per OBP, all of that is going to favor Diaz. But you look at the raw numbers, hits relatively similar within a few, home runs within a couple. But I'm looking at RBIs, for example, 60 RBIs compared to just 39. So 55 runs compared to, 55 as well compared. They're really, really close in some areas. So I think that's one player you can make a case for. Obviously, I'm not saying take out Yandy Diaz or take out Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But if for some reason one of them isn't able to play, I think Naylor could be that first guy, one of those first guys that maybe gets a ring.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. I can't even give Josh Naylor even a nod at this one. And unfortunately, he was going up against two guys that you're not going to beat. I mean, plain and simple, you're not going to beat him out for a starting position, and let alone for that backup position. Maybe as a DH, he had an opportunity. But I don't know. This is a case where Josh Naylor, yeah, he's having a good season. He's having his most exceptional season in his career. Unfortunately, statistically, it's not better than the other two guys that were, in the final two, let alone the guys selected and on the roster. So I can't give Josh Naylor the most. I get where you're coming from, but yeah, I'm not.
If one of those two goes out, who do you have somebody else that you'd plug in if one of those two couldn't play? Do you have
for the AL side of things? I'm gonna have to, sit here and dive into it, but probably not. I mean, he probably would be my third pick out of that, but I mean, realistically, I'm not looking at third options for those two. That's the whole point of the All-Star Game type of thing. But I guess if I have to pick somebody, potentially Luke Raley for the Rays. That's the guy in the AL I'd look at as a potential snub here at the first base side of things, at least in the AL. But I mean, the big one for me, I'm looking at Wander Franco here. How is he snubbed on this situation? Hitting 283, 343 slug. He has been absolutely fantastic for the Rays, leading the team in stolen bases, 26 stolen bases right now. Been exceptional defensively, and he's second in baseball right now for WAR, just shy of Shohei Ohtani. I don't know how a guy like that, who is statistically exceptional, is being left off a roster on an AL team where the All-Stars position not necessarily as deep as it once was. Let's just put it that way. Like there are situations where you could obviously make a case he's not going to beat out Corey Seager. Don't get me wrong, but I do see him sliding in there as the backup by all means. I mean, you're not going to take. You're not going to take. I think if in between Bo Bichette and Wander Franco, I think statistically I'm taking Wander Franco. I don't think that's any doubt in anybody's mind right now. I think he should be highlighted more. Unfortunately, I guess Bo Bichette takes the cake here. But yeah, I think that it's as far as snubs go, that's my snub.
I'd say that was one that kind of surprised a lot of people too. I thought for sure he was going to be someone that made that list as well. Going to another guy who I thought could have made. I don't know who I'd take out for him, but I really think Fernando Tatis did have a case to make it as well as one of the outfielders. I know, obviously, coming off the PD suspension, there's all of that sort of stuff you could look in there, but he has been dynamic when he has played this year. He has had a really, really good season as well. I mean, 44 RBIs, 78 hits, 16 home runs, 14 stolen bases, cracked a triple just the other day as well. He's had a really, really good season. He's very dynamic nonetheless, despite the injury, the PEDs, everything the last couple of years. I don't know who you necessarily take out in their place. I mean, you look at the outfield in the NL as well. So I don't know who I'd take out, but I think he's someone who really made a good case for it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Again, PED coming off PED suspension, I don't think you deserve anything that next year. That's my personal opinion. I don't think you really deserve anything in your entire career if you use PEDs like he did. And he admitted to it, so that's the completely different story than some of the other guys we've seen that have not admitted to it. But yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of a penalty for the PED situation. Statistically, yes, it has been worthy of at least a bench spot, and I do think if they do drop Corbin Carroll due to injury, I do think he slides in as a bench player for the NL, as they are going to upgrade somebody from the bench to the starting position. I do think that would be the case. I think he's the next up on the list, but. Yeah, I don't know. I'm torn with him because it's like PED situations. It gets a little hairy. Like that's, especially nowadays. Like, why are you even playing with that? You are literally one of the hot and up and coming players, and you just wasted your entire season away due to that. And I don't know. That one bothers me just because of the PED situation. I just don't think they should be eligible for anything the next year. But statistically, yes, I'll give you that. I do think.
I'll say if they did make the rule like you weren't eligible, I would agree. I've been like 100%. But since they never made it a rule, then it's like, well,
yeah. I mean, it's kind of one of those. I think it's kind of one of those unwritten things. Is maybe what they're going with. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a gray area that coming back from that. So I can't hold it against him if he makes it. I'm not going to say he shouldn't make it because realistically, statistically, he could make it. I mean, there's as a fill-in, I absolutely think there's a possibility. So. Yeah. There's a few guys that also stand out to me. Beyond that, You talk Christian Yelich, potentially Brandon Nimmo, Isaac Paredes, Kettle Marte, Goldie. They all stand out as like they could have made it. But I realistically think this year is probably one of the few that I can honestly say I'm not surprised by any of the starters, and I'm not surprised by any of the bench players. Maybe Lourdes Gurriel. Again, that's probably the only one out of the entire roster that I look at and I'm like, really? That's the guy? Considering you had Corbin Carroll exceptional for the Diamondbacks. Lourdes Gurriel has been great in his own right. Again, I just mentioned Fernando Tatis being better. Brandon Nimmo, I think, was better. I think Christian Yelich was better. And all deserves kind of that conversation. But, yeah, I don't think there's any surprises other than that one. I think that's just really – and really, I think my biggest snub – I'm going to stand by it. I think Wander Franco is the biggest snub out of all of them. That one, I can't get off that. That is just such a wild one to be snubbed for me.
Absolutely. And speaking of like fill-ins, I'm going to go back to Christian Yelich because that was going to be my next one as well. I know the first handful of months for him were a little bit yuckish. I know it was a bit of a rough start for him, but my oh my, just looking at those last 23 games, he's been absolutely sensational. He's really cranked it up there in the back since that point. I know rough start, but when you've cranked it up the way he has, I think it puts you at least in contention for it. I mean, maybe as a reserve, maybe as a fill-in, but I think when you encompass it as a whole, I think it's balanced out pretty well. It's just been a tale of two extremes. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, with the voting, they remember the bad and they forget about the good in that case. So I think Yelich was the next one on my list for sure. I think if they have to start doing fill-ins, I think he's got a really good shot to be one of them. Or at least he should.
And I'll also throw out another name, and I don't think he statistically probably deserves this, but as far as being just a wonder kid and like absolutely exceptional for the eye and just, promoting your young up-and-coming players in this situation and trying to grow the game. Elly De La Cruz for the Reds. I don't see why he couldn't be an injury replacement. Yeah, sure, there's probably guys statistically, again, that would deserve that spot, but screw that. Let's be honest. Let's have fun with this. This is summer game. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. Yes, it gives you home field advantage for the World Series. I don't care. Let's have fun with this. Let's put exceptional superstars in the game or guys that are up-and-coming superstars. I'm going to stand by Wander Franco here. And then I'm also going to throw in Elly De La Cruz. Throw these guys in there as injury replacements or even just as a bonus offering for whatever. Whatever they want to do. And just throw them out there as your in case of COVID platoon guys. How they have those extra 5 guys still on the roster. Throw these extra 5 guys here on the roster. Use Wander Franco. Use Elly De La Cruz. I'd say Tatis, Yelich, somebody else for the NL. There's lots of guys you can just throw in there to platoon. Just let them at least be a part of the festivities because I think it'd be kind of cool to see. And for a guy like Elly De La Cruz, it gives him an opportunity to kind of look forward to something in the future. He may not be a part of it this year, but being acknowledged as potentially one of the up and comers in the league would be huge for him. And so I don't know. I think Elly De La Cruz. It makes no rational sense as far as any of it goes. But he'd be a fun little injury replacement to add. And I say little, knowing full well the dude's 6'4", but still, he would be a fun replacement just for injury replacement sake, just because I think it'd be entertaining.
He's been absolutely sensational. I think the Reds are 19-4 since he entered the lineup too. He's been incredible. He's flipped what was arguably the worst team in the league to a division leader at one point too. He's been absolutely incredible. I get you can't really vote him in when you've only played 23 games, but like you said, an injury replacement. Something if it was in Cincinnati, let's per se, then somehow you force him in there regardless. You find a way, but if you can find a way to get him in there in any way, shape, or form, you cruise him right on over to Seattle and you get him in the lineup somehow. Whatever it takes. I think if you can find a way without it being the initial voting, because the initial voting you can't really do it off of 23 games. That makes sense. There's not too much argument. But if there's any sort of loophole, go ahead and find it and De La Cruz him right on it. Find a way to get him into that. But We talked a little bit about the players in the All-Star game now. There's a little bit of festivities going on, and arguably the biggest one in all of All-Star sports right now would be the Home Run Derby. It is one of the few that has withstood the test of time. You look at the dunk contest, it's petered out. The Pro Bowl's an absolute travesty. We're not going to talk about that. Then you look at three-point shootouts, but the Home Run Derby has withstood the test of time. It feels like every year it's one of the most looked forward to events, I would say, especially for All-Star Weekend. We got a pretty good list of guys hitting this year as well, too. When we look down the list, going from Randy Arozarena, Mookie Betts, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Julio Rodriguez, Pete Alonso. It's a real Adley Rutschman. There's a really, really good list of batters going through here. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was Juan Soto who won that one late after, even though Julio Rodriguez had one hell of a run as well. So putting you on the spot here, we're going to see if one of us can predict the future, and maybe we'll put some money on it as well as if we're willing to throw away some on sports betting, because it's a little rough here and there. But if you had to pick right now, who's winning the home run derby?
Julio Rodriguez. I'm not even do not hesitate.
We're in the exact same boat here, so this is going to be.
Do not hesitate. Do not pass go. That dude had such an exceptional home run derby last year. Unfortunately, petered out at the end. I mean, it's what happens every time we see a big numbers type of first round, second round. They always end up petering out at the end. Unfortunately, maybe they need to do something about it. Also, I don't like the idea of maybe they've floated the idea of like accumulation of home runs going into the last round. No, scratch that. I would hate that. I like the idea of starting anew each round. But yeah, no, I think Julio Rodriguez at home in Seattle, it's made for news type of situation. Like, this is made for TV, Disney Channel type of stuff. Like, let him go have fun in Seattle. He knows how to hit there. It's his favorite. Obviously, it's his home ballpark, so it's going to be rocky. We already know it's going to be crazy. But I will throw a loophole out there. I'll let you go first, but I do have a dark horse for this one. After you go ahead and make your pick.
Well, I'm going to keep it pretty quick and short. Mine was also Rodriguez. I mean, he had 81 through 3 rounds last year as well. I mean, he was still so young, and he still did that. I think this year in his home, as you mentioned, he's going to come back. He's going to put on a show. So I got Rodriguez as second most through 3 rounds next to Vlad Guerrero's 91 a few years back. So I'm still going to stick with Rodriguez on that one. But for my quote unquote dark horse, I'll go and just go with mine really quickly. I think I'm going to go with Randy Arozarena as my dark horse. I think it's a close one, but Rodriguez has all my money, but I do think that Randy Arozarena, he's on a really strong pace. He's going to go well past his single season high this year, most likely. I think he's on pace for about 30-ish or so. So I'll take a Arozarena, someone who can maybe just randomly get hot and start cranking him. Like, does the opposite, survives the first 2 rounds and somehow cranks like 81 in the last 2 rounds or something stupid.
You know what? That's a good one. I honestly, I really do like Randy Arozarena. Now, mind you, we're making these picks before they finalize the roster. There are still, I think, 2 more spots to get filled in for this, because they usually have 8.
It doesn't matter who those other 2 are. Though.
Yeah. I mean, really. But I'm going to go Pete Alonso. That's my dark horse, only because he's been in this Derby 4 times previous. This will be his 4th time in the Derby. He's won it twice already. He's trying to join, ironically, a Seattle great and Cincinnati great, if you want to go there, with Ken Griffey Jr. as the only ever 3-time winners. What better place for him to join the 3-time winner category than in Seattle, right there in front of Ken Griffey Jr., who is acting as host, by the way, quote-unquote host of the All-Star Game festivities, especially the Home Run Derby. So could be a lot of fun. He'd be handing the trophy over to Pete Alonso. But that's my dark horse, and I say that knowing full well he could just put on a show as well. Pete Alonso is one of those guys. When he starts hitting, he starts crushing the ball. Look, Adley Rutschman, I think, is going to put on a valiant show, but I think he's going to be the guy that gets the low man on the totem pole type of thing. Mookie Betts is going to end up with like 12, first round, probably not enough to advance situation. And yeah, Adley Rutschman's going to, because Adley Rutschman, for those that don't know, he's not a stereotypical power hitter. Yes, he does have power. And when he hits one, it's a no doubter 55% of the time. Like, literally, it's statistically proven that every time when he hits a home run, half of them are absolute no doubters. So it's kind of crazy to think that, but he doesn't hit a lot of them. He hits 24 career home runs for Adley Rutschman. So yeah, I'm going to go Pete Alonso, my dark horse, but Julio Rodriguez is my favorite. I think he's probably everybody's favorite in this situation just because of what he did last year, and now he's at home.
Absolutely. Definitely looking forward to it. Definitely can't wait. Go and let us know in the comment sections below who you think might have got snubbed and who you think is going to go and win the home run derby as well. But I feel like most of the money is going to be on Julio Rodriguez, which means it's going to be somebody else because that's just how it works. But either way, if it's him or Alonso, the scriptwriter should get a little bonus for it because it looks like it'd have a whole lot of fun. So that's going to do it here for the tip-off. That's now going to take us into Kelcey's second favorite part of every show, and that, of course, is the main event. And for the main event, we're going to go ahead and transition over to the hardwood. We talked a little bit about it last week. NBA free agency was about to get underway. Big trades started, a lot going on. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the big fish. It is official. 11 years later, Damian Lillard he's officially requested a trade from the Portland Trailblazers. After being loyal to the soil for a good amount of time, he's decided, you know what? We got 7 guards and they're all children and we have absolutely no chance of winning. Go ahead and send me out of here. the preferred destination is once again being reported as Miami. That's where he wants to go. They just obviously have to work it out. So I'm gonna quote LeBron James, say it's about damn time. As much as I've always wanted Dame and the Blazers to win something, it's been since 2019 since they've really had a chance, and even then they really didn't have much of a chance. So I think it's about time. Let him go out there, let him see what he can do on a different stage.
Yes, I don't think there's any question about that. It's time for Dame to move on. He has been, you know what? I feel the same about Dame that I did about Melo leaving Denver. I feel like this is a situation where he has done everything in his power to drive things forward in Portland, just like Melo did in Denver. Tried his best to get Denver to the playoffs. And in the same vein, Dame tried his best to get them deep in the playoffs. I mean, so much so that we have one of the greatest memes ever of him waving Paul George off the court in his exploits. So I think it's a situation where Dame has done everything. It's obvious that Portland can't do enough to get him there. And so send him somewhere who can. And it's going to be tough, let's be honest, because the teams that he probably wants to go to and the teams that would be the best fit for him to have success are not going to be the guys giving Portland the best trade options. And that's what's this fine line right here. Is Portland going to choose to honor the man, or are they going to honor their bottom line at the end of the day? That's going to be the big question in this trade conversation. And I'll be honest, I don't know what's going to happen here, because it is absolutely wild. Because I mean, I'd love to see Dame go to a contender like Miami, but realistically, he's more likely to go somewhere like Minnesota, realistically.
I'm kind of happy you mentioned that, because I've mustered up a 3-team trade in my noggin here that I think could work out for a little bit of everybody. There's obviously a lot of logistics to make the money work, the draft picks and everything like that. We're just going to talk about the main players. We want to get him to Miami because that's his goal. So we're going to say Dame's going to go to Miami. We'll say those two alone can't quite make the trade happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that third team, and it's going to be Minnesota. What's going to happen is Damian Lillard's going to end up in Miami. Karl Anthony Towns is going to end up in Portland. So they're going to get a young all-star caliber player in exchange for Dame, for lack of better terms. They just paid Anthony Edwards a super bag, so that's who you are building around. Rudy Gobert, you gave up the entire state of Minnesota at that point to go get him, so you can't just get rid of him. It's not working with 3 centers that they have on the roster. So send Karl Anthony Towns and his 3-point shooting 7-foot self over into Portland to play with. To play with all those guards like Anthony Simons as well. Like, just play with all of those guys up there, because they're like 5 deep at young guards in Portland, including Exactly. I mean, you just drafted 1-2 with the 3rd pick. So I mean, go and get Karl Anthony Towns, get yourself a big there. Miami's going to get Dame Lillard. There's going to be like Tyler Hero, I think, is going to be part of the deal, and he's going to end up going to Minnesota. Draft picks are going to be involved as well. I think, honestly, if you're Miami, I think Duncan Robinson gets involved too. He probably goes to Minnesota. Throw in some draft picks, move some things around, but those are kind of the main pieces, because I think you're going to keep Scoot Henderson, obviously. He's not going anywhere. He's not a shooter either. He's a drive. He's going to drive to the paint. Then you can kick it out to your 7-foot 3-point shooter in Karl Anthony Towns, for who wants to revolutionize shooting out threes. You have Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons as your other guards you can work around. You're rebuilding, obviously. Portland's going to get some picks.
Still have Jeremy Grant.
Who can arguably be your number 1 scorer. So you'll have 3 different levels there. You'll be able to flip things around pretty quickly if Scoot's as good as we think he is. Minnesota, you're gonna get a point guard in some way, shape, or form, probably from one of those teams as well, or at least another guard to complement Anthony Edwards. Maybe get Tyler Hero to go in there. You're opening up the floor so much more for him to run and dunk on people. They're gonna get a lot of picks in it as well. Maybe Anthony Simons actually goes to Portland as part of the trade to give him another guard. Either way, there's ways to work it out. And I think those 3 teams you can get. Miami's getting the least amount. They're getting Damian Lillard, and that's it. Everything else they are shipping out. So they'll have to ship out some picks, some players, pretty much everything besides Jimmy Butler and Bam at this point. So there'll be some work to do, but it makes Miami the favorite in the East. It makes Minnesota, if they get that 8th seed, they're not getting clapped as easily. And I think it opens things up for the future, especially with Anthony Edwards. And if you're Portland, it kickstarts the rebuild a little bit faster, because Cat's still an all-star player, still in his 20s, and you just drafted Scoot Henderson. So you know what? Figure out the money. I'm not the GM. I'm not using the ESPN trade machine. This is just ideas I've made. Figure out the draft picks and everything like that. But I think those could be your main players for a Damian Lillard trade.
Yeah, I think to make that work, I think they've already shown that it has like 4 different players or 4 different picks that need to go for Miami, which they have. They have all the picks to send out too. I'd also mention maybe Vic Oladipo potentially being packaged in one of those trades as well. You talk about maybe going to Minnesota, maybe send Vic to Portland type of a situation. You never know. Look, don't be wrong, I still love Oladipo, but let's be fair to him and say his career is on the waning end and not the waxing end. It's tough to see, but those injuries are finally catching up. But yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're Miami, your number one goal right now is purely to just like get somebody to help you that you know at the end of the day, if you're in a finals again, it's not going to go 0 for 14. Like they're gonna hit their threes, at least 3 of their threes, to help you win these games. And we all know that he can close out just with the best of them too. So take some of the pressure off of Bam as well, off of Jimmy as well. So yeah, I do like that idea. But don't be surprised that, you mentioned teams that they package deals with. Looking at teams that have cap space that could take on some of these contracts, don't be surprised if somehow Sacramento gets involved. You talk about Minnesota potentially getting involved. Maybe it's a 4-team trade and Sacramento gets involved and Cat ends up in Sacramento, but then they send somebody somewhere else. Like there's potential possibilities all over the place here. Utah has all the cap space to play with too. Boston, because they haven't re-signed all their pieces yet, still does have space to play here. I don't think he ends up in Boston, but I do think if Boston gets involved, that could change a lot of minds. Because who knows with Boston type of situation. You also have Brooklyn to look at because Brooklyn has cut a lot of cap this offseason. Yes, they did re-sign Cam Johnson, but they got rid of Seth Curry. They got rid of pretty much anybody that is not going to be a starter this next year. They have the big four from the trade with Phoenix, or the big three, and then Dorian Finney-Smith from the trade with Dallas. So they have all 4 of those guys still, and Spencer Dinwiddie as well. So they have all 4 of those guys still ready to go, and they're probably going to start with Nick Claxton, and then there's a whole lot of nothing there on that bench. So they do have some cap space that could play with. Whether it's getting involved or bringing him in, I don't know, but it's probably getting involved. But yeah, I'm interested to see with this Dame thing. I don't have a proposal for a trade. There's just lots of fun commentary to talk about with Dame because you just never know with front offices whether they're going to honor the man or honor their bottom line at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That's definitely one we're going to keep an eye on. And you know what? Probably as soon as this comes out, then he'll end up getting traded. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. But next one I want to look at too is we're going to take a look at James Harden. James Harden re-upping with the 76ers, but it looks like it's with the intent to get traded as well. So he looks like he decided to take his option, and they're going to be looking to facilitate him. So one of the big rumored teams is the Clippers, finding a way to do that. I think there's a handful of options as well too, and with some of the re-signings, we'll see. But I'll go ahead and let you kind of go first on this. When you look at the trade market for James Harden, Sixers looking to move him. They say Tyrese Maxey is not getting moved, so him for Dame Lillard, we'll cross that out. But James Harden, where do you think his next stop is, and what did the Sixers get back?
I stand by what I said on the other day, said last week. I think he still ends up in Philly. I think at the end of the day, I think there's been rumors that he has no problem staying with Philly for giving it another shot. Now with Nick Nurse there, I think that's saying a lot. He actually met with Nick Nurse. They had a conversation, and that was what the rumors started swirling. Like maybe he will stay, maybe he won't. I do think there's more to that rumor than just a little smoke. I do think there's a lot of misty fire, if you will, at the little sparks being lit underneath them. He has a lot to prove still. Like, let's be honest, James Harden last year at the playoffs wasn't the best James Harden we've ever seen. Far from it. And at one point, turning down wide open layups because he just wasn't consistent enough for his own good. So it's a situation where we see James Harden. I think he would be more than happy to stay at Philly. I don't think it's time to break up that Philly bandwagon yet. Maybe hold steady for another year. But yeah, I'm going to say, personally, I think he stays in Philly. If he has a potential trade destination, it's probably somewhere on the West Coast. Maybe, I don't know, LA Clippers somehow. I don't know how they pull that off, but I'm just thinking of teams that maybe need a point guard somewhere. And there's not very many that need a point guard really anymore or can take on the likes of a James Harden.
I'll say it depends what James Harden wants to do. If he wants to shoot the ball 40 times and score 40 again, that's probably not going to happen in Philly, even with Nick Nurse. So if that's what he wants, then I think he's going to have to go. But if you want a chance to win and still be a 1A, 1B type of option, I still think Philly's he's a really good distributor. He led the league in assists. He's led the league in assists. Him and Joel Embiid are a dynamic duo until the playoffs, at the second round of the playoffs. I think if they can trade him and get something in return that can kind of balance things out. I don't know what the trade would be. If somehow the Celtics were just like, you know what, we're finally going to pull the trigger and trade Jaylen Brown, I guess. And that way the Celtics finally get a point guard so they don't have their forwards handling the ball so much. And then at this time, Jaylen Brown gets then Tyrese Maxey takes over. I don't really know. It just feels like there's not really a lot of market out there for him in a way that fits the best. I feel like this is the best scenario for him that comes to my mind. I mean, maybe the Clippers, like you meant, like has been rumored, but how do you put him and Westbrook out there at the same time necessarily? Those two did not like it the one year they played together. Or do you put Westbrook on the bench and tell him, look, somebody's going to get hurt in a week, you'll be starting before you know it?
They actually did a good job when they played at OKC together. You are
no,
James Harden. James Harden didn't like it.
Houston, yeah.
Yeah. James Harden didn't enjoy it as much when they were in Houston. No, that's for sure. But no, like in OKC, that was a different story. Like they did enjoy it, their time there, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you could do with it. It really feels like if it's James Harden, there's some kind of reunion somewhere with every team. It feels like that wouldn't fit James Harden. That's what this feels like. Any team that has the space and has the need for him, it feels like a reunion, or there's some kind of combination there that just doesn't make sense. And that's why I don't know where he ends up. I think that's why I think he just ends up back right here in Philly. I don't think there's much point to him leaving, really. I think you take your $35 million this year and you have a good time, and you know what? You go to the playoffs again and you try to get past round 2. See if you can get past the Celtics for the Eastern Conference, or maybe the Heat for the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe get yourself to your first championship game since you wore Thunder colors.
You know, I just can't think of anywhere else either. So I think that's the best fit right now. And I think for the Sixers, I don't even know who you replace Harden with. The best option to replace him would have been Kyrie, arguably, but Kyrie's staying in Dallas, which that's a different thing as well too. We'll see if they can actually we'll have a positive win-loss there. But we're looking at some of the other.
It's like a never-ending rotation between Harden, Kyrie, and the same 6 teams. It feels like it's just like, come on, guys, can we get some kind of somebody new here soon?
Something different. But speaking of something new, we're gonna stay in Texas, but I want to take a look at Houston right now, because Houston kind of setting the market on fire with this offseason. Not only did they sign Dillon Brooks to about $20 million, but then bringing in Fred VanVleet for about $40 million in his own right. Fred VanVleet getting a huge bag to be the starting point guard. Then Dillon Brooks, who when we kind of talked about when it was that he wasn't good, when the Grizzlies said under no circumstances are they going to re-sign him. Not only is he getting re-signed, he's getting a huge bag to quote unquote be like the veteran leader of that young Houston team. So I don't know what Houston's doing. I'm not gonna lie. That's a lot of money for 2 players who are quality players, but normally not guys you probably pay that much money to, especially when you're a young team with like Jabari Smith, Jalen Green. You don't bring them in just as veteran presence, I guess. So I don't know what Ime Udoka has in mind, but this one has me a little confused because that's a lot of money for those 2.
Yeah, the Dillon Brooks one was more shocking than anything else. I do think VanVleet going to the Rockets to be with that young team, I think point guard wise is a good fit. I don't think there's any question about that. I do so question the Dillon Brooks thing, though. You heard me out when the harshest critics about what he did this last year. I mean, really, there was no offense to talk about this season. It's non-existent. It's been going downhill since 2 years ago when he burst onto the playoff scene and had a great playoffs 2 years ago. But we haven't seen that same offensive output since then. It's been a rough situation. Desmond Bane stepped up for the Grizzlies to be that second fiddle after a really good performance last year as well, and this year really took over. And I mean, Dillon Brooks kind of felt like the Lance Stevenson, but like not the good Lance Stevenson. This is the post blowing in the ear of LeBron Lance Stevenson, or maybe you take Deshaun Stevenson. After he tattooed the Mavericks championship trophy on his arm. Like there's something about when guys go up against LeBron and they fail multiple times. Their career seems to get really off the rails really fast. And I think this is the case with Dillon Brooks. The only chance that this $80 million fully guaranteed contract works out for Dillon Brooks is if he can find some sort of offense where he's giving you at least 15 to 18 a game. Because this 0 for 7 shooting nights cannot happen anymore. You're getting paid $80 million guaranteed. Like, yeah, that can't happen anymore. That's absolutely wild to see. And yeah. I don't know. Dillon Brooks, to me, that's the biggest question mark for any signing so far this offseason, next to the Kings re-signing Harrison Barnes. That's probably the second worth re-signing.
Yeah, it still completely baffles me as well. So we'll see. Maybe Udoka sees something there that we don't see. I mean, last time we saw Udoka, he was in the final. So he is a smart man when it comes to coaching basketball. But we won't get too far into those weeds. But just looking at some of the other quick re-signings, just circling through, Cameron Johnson going back to Brooklyn, Kyle Kuzma going back to Washington on a huge deal. So I guess Washington, him and Jordan Poole will give them something to watch. We'll see what it translates to. Chris Middleton staying with Milwaukee, as we imagine. Draymond staying with the Warriors after Jordan Poole was traded. No doubt there, really. I mean, you don't get rid of both of them. And then we'll go down. I want to stop in and pit stop at the Lakers here as we go down the list too, because they made a handful of moves. But they were, none of them were huge moves, but they were all really subtle. Keeping Austin Reeves for not a stupid price. That's really good. He's a good fit. Keeping Rui Hachimura for a pretty good price. Like it. Keeping D'Angelo Russell. We'll see. He almost I feel like he's going to end up being traded, or at least for the regular season, he's going to be there to just create some shots. And then in the postseason, you'll figure it out later.
For a not bad contract, by the way.
Exactly. A very tradable one if they decide to too. I love the Gabe Vincent signing. I really do. I know how good is he? We'll have to wait and see. Was it just a magical playoff run and he was part of it? We'll have to wait and see. But a point guard who can create his own shot, can hit threes, but doesn't need the ball in his hands, can move without the ball. Because how many times does he just kind of, as the point guard, he's like, here you go, Jimmy. Jimmy did his 17 pump fakes and kicked it out to him for a three. So I think he's the perfect type of point guard to play in that alongside an Anthony Davis and a LeBron James, especially if they get to the playoffs too, where those two are going to, LeBron's going to force into the paint, get double teamed, and kick it out. It's been that way for 20 years. It's not going to change now. He's a guy who has shown the ability to hit those threes and score 20+ points for a series. So I really like that one. Not much for a good defensive player, nothing great, but I think come playoff time, a guy that can run the offense, create a shot, but at the same time catch and shoot. I think that's a really good one. Some of the other guys like Jackson Hayes and Taurean Prince, they're really good fits. So if LeBron and Anthony Davis could stay healthy and play like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, I know LeBron will be year 21. So not saying he has to score 40. He just has to be his normal kind of distributing and then slashing to the basket itself. But I think I think they made some really good signings if those two are able to stay healthy and play at their game.
Yeah, I love the Jackson Hayes trade personally, or signing personally. I think he's a great pickup here for the Lakers. Coming off the bench, he's going to be a great fit. Really athletic big guy who can still play down low. He is willing and able to play down low. Get you 10 rebounds a game if you let him, which in the grand scheme of things for this Lakers team, hey, you need a real center sometimes to go out there and play next to AD. And I know Jackson Hayes is much smaller than AD, but he does like to play the center position. So it does help out there in that situation. AD maybe not getting banged up as much. I think an underrated signing, though, for this team is Cam Reddish. He played big minutes there in Portland this last season, obviously coming over from New York. But I do think there's a lot to be said about Cam Reddish still. I do think there's a lot that he can still impact on the game. Can obviously play offense very well, but can he get his defense back to the levels they were, quote unquote, rumored to be when he was drafted by Atlanta? I think if he can actually go back to playing defense, he is a fantastic pick for this team. And don't be surprised if he turns into that new 3-and-D style guy for the Lakers.
If nothing else, he could fill in for some games for Anthony Davis when you want to lower his minutes throughout the regular season as well. So I think that could be a really, really good fit for him. I think a very versatile piece. Like they did a really good job filling in around those two, but now it's just up to those two to be healthy and be at the top of their game, especially Anthony Davis. He has to play like he did. Like he showed throughout those playoffs, there was a lot of those games where he was absolutely dominant. Weirdly enough, the odd numbered games like 1, 3, 5, etc., those where he was absolutely outstanding. If he can do that, I think they could be a very formidable force next year if all things line up with the way they built. So now I think we got to talk about some of the goofy signings or some of the goofy moves. I'm going to go ahead and start with Max Strus getting $63 million as part of a sign and trade from Miami to Cleveland for Chetty Osman, and then I think it was Stevens was the other one, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know what was going on there. I don't know what Max Strus is a good player. He showed up a lot last year. He also went 0 for 10 in a single game from shooting beyond the arc. And you just paid him $63 million and traded away someone who pretty much does the exact same thing for him. So that one kind of baffles me. I'm not gonna lie. Max Strus is a good player. Now you're paying a lot of money to a guy who you basically just want to be a 3-and-D guy, who can do that, but can also go 0 for 10 real quick, fast, and in a hurry. And it's mostly a 3 guy, not as much of a D guy.
Yeah, that one was pretty bad. I don't think there's any question here. I'm going to throw in also, I said it earlier, Harrison Barnes re-signing with the Kings. That one just baffles the mind. I mean, look at the playoffs. What did he do past game one? Game one, yes, he had a great game one against the Warriors, but then where was he the rest of the playoffs? Non-existent. Gave you maybe 14 a game. You can get that from any one of these guys that you could re-sign or sign from any other team. You could have gotten Dante DiVincenzo back, and he could have filled the same role. Maybe you actually went out and tried to go get Draymond or tried to get one of those guys. Maybe you go get Jackson Hayes. I mean, there were better quality options there for the Kings, but that's my bias speaking. So my non-biased pick is going to be Orlando Magic going and getting Joe Ingles and devoting what is a major amount of their cap space to Joe Ingles when they could have added a high-quality foundational piece to their team, and they were just like, Joe Ingles will fit. That's good enough for us. No, what? Like, pause, timeout, rewind. Why? Like, why is that and then you re-sign Mo Wagner? Like, those are your two major booms for the Magic. That's tough. Like, you could do so much more this offseason, and they're just like, we don't care. We're the Orlando Magic. We got Jalen Suggs. We got Paulo Banchero. We got Cole Anthony. Like, we'll be fine. But realistically, you could have added one more piece to that team and been really damn good going forward.
You know, one more piece that I think would have been good for that team, but I think he got a king's ransom of his own, is Bruce Brown from the champion Denver Nuggets. Bit of a playoff hero nonetheless, going to the Pacers for $45 million nonetheless. Bruce Brown's a great player. We've been talking about since we were doing color cast when he's on the Nets. He's the best small center in the game, basically, as a two-guard who basically bangs down low on occasion. He's a really, really good role player. So much so that even during the celebration parade, Mike Malone's like, we're going to bring him back. Then they threw on a few zeros on there, and it's like, he's not coming back. The Pacers, that's a really good player, but how much did you just pay when you still have – that's still a building team. There's still Miles Turner. There's still Buddy Hield. They still have some really good players as well. And, of course, Tyrese Halliburton, who just got paid. I don't know how I feel about giving Bruce Brown that kind of contract, because I think he's – Bruce Brown, you put on a team that's, like, really close and just needs that extra something, like maybe your Kings or something like that. If you're the Pacers, I don't know if he's the type of guy you give $45 million to, but – hey, good on Bruce Brown. You capitalized on that awesome playoff run playing with Jokic. You stood out as much as anybody, and you know what? You just got paid for. So shout out to him. But for the Pacers, I just don't know if I don't know if that's the best move for them when you dedicate that kind of money. I feel like there were other options for them, similar to what you said with the Magic.
Yeah, I got to throw one more baffling one out there. With the Brown, I get Brown being paid, just not that much. That was wild. But Detroit, I got to go to Detroit right now because I don't know what the heck they're thinking. You have absolutely the youngest team in the league. Second youngest team in the league. Top three youngest team in the league. You have Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Oscar Thompson, Killian Hayes. They'll all eat up major perimeter minutes already. You already have a few big men down low that are going to take up minutes. And then you go and get Monte Morris, Joe Harris, Alec Burks, and Bojan Bogdanovic, all of which are 28 or older. Where are these guys going to fit into your rotation? Like, what are you just bringing them in to be end of the bench guys? Because you paid them a whole lot of money to be end of the bench guys, if that's the case. You just wasted all that cap space you have going forward. And I know, they got a new coach. They're trying new things. Blah, 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 blah. What? Like, why are you getting so old so fast? Again, like the Magic, like, do better with your money. Like, come on, guys. Like, you can make mistakes like re-signing Harrison Barnes if you're the Kings. You can't make mistakes like signing Bojan Bogdanovic and then Monte Morris to a contract. Like, that's just doesn't really make sense, especially Monte Morris, who for the Nuggets has not been the most explosive guard, if you will, in his career. He's been very underwhelming at best.
Yeah, at best. That's a good way to say it. So far looking through NBA free agency, I think we've kind of agreed. There's been some good, there's been some bad, and there has been some ugly as well. So definitely we'll see. I feel like as we talked about Dame, Harden, there's a lot of moves potentially on the horizon. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that as well. But I think a lot of the main movement pieces we've seen are gone. There's going to be some questionable ones, but I mean, we talked about the Max Strus one being kind of goofy. Now that we say that, well, watch him just score like 25 a game. Now watch him just turn into that dude. So there's a lot to keep a look at there. So I'll go ahead and just ask you really quickly. If you had to take a guess, who do you think is next to be on the move besides the ones that we talked about? Where do you think the next big signing might be?
That's tough, man. There's a few guys floating out there I think could get a nice surprise bag. And not without going to the low hanging fruit, but I think the obvious answer here, I'm just gonna say it because I feel like it's obvious, but we haven't really talked about him, is going to be Jaylen Brown. I think he's the next big bag to fall. I think if it's anybody else, I'll be surprised because he just seems the most likely to be the next one to go. Anything else beyond that would be a shock to me because I feel like once he falls, then we're going to see a lot of the other pieces go. I think that's when we'll see the Dame talks really heat up, and I think that's when we'll see Harden really being shopped out there. I think, but until Jaylen is shopped, because nobody knows. Because if Jaylen doesn't sign for a bag with Boston, then where's he going to? What's going to happen? Like what at the end of the day, who's getting involved? Where's he going to get? What's going to happen? Then you have the Clippers floating out there potentially, trying to snag Harden and Dame. So I don't know. There's too much to deal with. But it all starts with Jaylen. I think that's going to be the next one that has to fall.
Absolutely. And it's considering he has the biggest bag possible with the Celtics, I'm surprised that the signing hasn't been made yet as well. I think that's what makes it really interesting. It's like, why haven't you signed him yet? That is a second team all NBA player. You should have him locked up for the next 5 years. So I think while they're not shopping him, I think they're also sitting back in that same vein. Like, well, hold on now. Let's all take it easy here and there. It's almost like they're scheming. They're trying to scheme as well. So I'm in agreement with you. I think that's the next big one for sure. One that I don't think will happen, but I'm keeping an eye on is if the Clippers really, really wanted to kind of shake things up, maybe Paul George or Kawhi ends up on the move. I don't know if they would, considering they do have some player options coming up. So I do think there is a chance. I mean, the injuries have just brutalized both of them. It's been hard to keep them both on the court at the same time. Maybe if the right player like Jaylen Brown's available, maybe Clippers throw their name in there. I don't know. It's highly unlikely, but it's something I'm keeping an eye on too, because unfortunately Kawhi and health, those two just cannot seem to shake hands. Paul George, really good, but health has kind of got him the last couple of years. Really great podcast though, but at the same time, they just haven't been quite able to stay healthy. So maybe the Clippers, depending on how it goes, they did just re-sign Westbrook. Maybe they look to break up that dynamic duo who everybody has picked to be NBA Finals champs like 3 of the last 5 years, it feels like. So just that's one that I'm thinking I don't think will happen, but I'm keeping an eye on it. Like, what if just like the floor caves in or something like that, and maybe or they have a chance to go get Dame and they throw in one of those guys. I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, it's possible. I mean, look, we've already been shocked once. I'd say the John Collins trade so far has been the most shocking. So at this point in time, it wouldn't surprise me if like a Paul George. I'd say it's more likely to be Paul than it is Kawhi. But I wouldn't be shocked to see either one of them mentioned in a trade package, especially for somebody like Dame. I think that's a complete possibility.
Absolutely. And I do want to say a lot of players getting paid too. We mentioned Anthony Edwards getting a bag, Tyrese Halliburton getting a bag, LaMelo Ball getting a bag, a lot of really good players getting paid. So I'm curious to see what those franchises do moving forward now that they got their cornerstones and they're paying them like that as well. So I'm really curious. We saw the Pacers. They feel Bruce Brown's a good fit. We'll see if the Timberwolves follow my advice and somehow do some crazy shenanigan trades, because the 6 towers down low is not working when your best player is a slashing guy who dunks on people. So they got some work to do there, but definitely a lot to keep track of on the offseason. We'll be monitoring it the entire way, and we'll definitely have a lot to talk about as we head through the summer break into NFL season as NBA wraps up as well. But that's going to do it here for our main event, and that is now going to take us into Kelcey's favorite part of every show, and that is, of course, the tip-off brought to you by Outlier. Use outlier.bet /HighLowSports. Get yourself a free 7-day trial. Bet smarter, not harder. Everything you need as far as odds, trends, game-to-game numbers, statistics, everything you need to try and put down some money and win a whole lot more back, whether it's a parlay or just individual bets. So definitely go check them out. So we're here in crunch time. I'm going to go ahead and take over first because you mentioned it earlier. The USFL with their second championship game this year. And once again, back-to-back, the Birmingham Stallions winning for the second one as well of the USFL 2.0, 28-12 win over the Pittsburgh Maulers. And the league MVP, Alex Mago, once again added 4 touchdown passes to go along with 64 rushing yards. But not the MVP, as his receiver Deion Kane, who is the MVP of the championship game with 3 of those touchdowns. You might remember, but he did play for the Colts and the Steelers in the NFL, coming out of Clemson, a later round pick who a lot of people were high on. He just never quite materialized at the NFL, but you see here in the USFL, showing that when 75% of your catches go for touchdowns, that will do. Mago throwing for 8 touchdowns and adding 148 yards on the ground throughout the playoff run, and absolutely incredible show by Birmingham, who last year, a little bit more on the ground. They controlled it on the ground. They ran through everybody, played good defense. This year, they turned it into an air raid. Like Skip Holtz and that team they're firing on all cylinders. I know it's early in the USFL, but we presume it's going to be around a while. And they got the formula early on. They definitely got they got whatever magic sauce or spices, whatever's in that stew. They figured it out early.
Yeah, look, that's some homegrown cooking right there. That's what that is. No, it was absolutely fantastic. Obviously, me being the Stallions fan here, it's great to see back to back. And you mentioned it; they did it 2 different ways, 2 different seasons. Jamar Smith and team. That team was a very much ground and pound. They're gonna run it down your throat, and you're gonna have to swallow it. But a great defense as well. This year, all those great defensive players. You look at Scooby Wright potentially at middle linebacker. Injured pretty much most of the season for the Stallions, so it was a tough sled. Honestly, there's a laundry list of guys for the Stallions that were on the injured list there going in the championship game, and most of them, if they were playing on the field, would make some sort of impact somewhere or another. So a pretty much all-star bench injury list for the Stallions. Still able to pull it out against the surprise Pittsburgh Maulers. Let's be honest, because we didn't know what to get from them, and once they got going and once everything got underway, it was absolutely fun to watch them. A good turnaround by the Maulers. Got to give them credit for that. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun USFL season. I'm ready to see season 3. If you guys missed it, by the way, our good friend Zach and the ref did hold their summer stock there at Canton as well. Summer stock 2, so they're getting ready for spring stock 3 next year at the opening of the USFL, and there's rumors that they might be opening up a new central location for teams to play out of. So maybe they're going to New Orleans potentially now. So we'll have to wait and see. It could be a case where one team, maybe Detroit plays actually in Michigan by themselves now, or maybe they get a further northeast situation where they put New Jersey and Pittsburgh in closer to maybe their cities. We'll have to wait and see, but yeah, it's been a fun USFL season 2. I can't wait for season 3 of it for sure.
Absolutely. And I just want to reiterate what you said too. Shout out to our boy, Zach Kyleman. He's been on the show a few times, always on there with 4th with doing a wonderful job throughout this USFL season and the whole team. So if you haven't followed them, haven't checked them out, you definitely want to go do so. Everything you need for alternate football. He is the guy, the man, the myth, the legend. Zach Attack himself, whatever you need, he's your guy. And just to hammer on the last thing about how good Birmingham has been, 24 total games played, 21-3. Absolutely insane how they've started things off. Will they three-peat? That's the question. And you know what? We'll have to check in with Zach a little bit closer to next season. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. But Kelcey, we're gonna talk football, but not even this kind of football, and not the kind of football most of you are thinking.
No, we're talking about football. The one you play on a 120-yard turf that is 53 yards wide. That is soccer, and I don't know why you wish got really big on me, DJ. You're not talking soccer. I'm talking soccer, and more importantly, I'm talking Jesus Ferreira. It is the middle of the Gold Cup, and Jesus Ferreira in the important Game 3 of their group stage in the Gold Cup after a tough game against Jamaica, and then a big win in game number 2. Game 3, they had to get a big W to clinch their group. And not only do they get a big W and then 6-0 win over Trinidad and Tobago, who has long been a thorn in the side of the U.S. men's national team, but Jesus Ferreira scores his second hat trick of the tournament. Not 1, not 2, 3 goals in the first half. Absolutely fantastic. 6 goals in total. He skyrockets to the top of the goal scorers list in the Gold Cup. And if you guys want to harken back a little bit to our World Cup conversation, I said this back then about Jesus Ferreira, the young 22-year-old. Let's not forget, he is a very young player still. He plays in America for FC Dallas. When he's at his best, he's able to step away from the back line, step back closer to the midfield, play in a more distributing role, and attack at goal. You saw a lot of that from him in both of these hat tricks so far. It's been fantastic to see Jesus Ferreira now getting up to 16 total goals in 21 appearances for America. Fastest to get to there, breaking the record by Landon Donovan, and we all know how great Landon Donovan was. But very interesting to see with Jesus Ferreira, especially at a time where Fuller and Balogun, the young superstar in the making, if you will, overseas, is now signing, who has now agreed to play for America going forward. So does Ferreira still give him a pressure for the number 1 spot? Does he start signing as a number 2 striker, especially with Now, Greg Berhalter returning to the scene. We'll have to wait and see that, but I do love it for Jesus Ferreira. I do think this is a fantastic situation, and a young kid still getting his feet wet. But I think there's going to be a lot of teams in Europe that are looking at 2 hat tricks in the international play. That's very interesting, especially for what is right now at this date and time, 11th ranked America in the FIFA World Rankings. If they can win this tournament, they will break the top 10. Last time this happened, actually, the previous Gold Cup, right before the World Cup. So we'll have to wait and see how this goes, but I do think this is a situation where we'll be watching the U.S. men's national team and Jesus Ferreira making some noise going forward.
Absolutely. This would be the 8th Gold Cup for the USMNT as well, so they could pull off. That'll be their 8th Gold Cup title. And I just want to hammer home the point about Ferreira, he's basically turned into Carmelo Anthony at this point, I feel like, but in soccer. He is a pure scorer as it comes right now. Looking at it, over this term, he's had 16 goals in 21 outings across all of his different competitions, which is just, I don't even know how to put it in the words. And I think you talked about Balogun as well. I think those two are going to be that U.S. men's national, that FIFA 2026. That team's going to be really, really dangerous with those two as the strikers if they can make that one work. So I think that's something I'm definitely looking forward to. So he's been absolutely dynamic.
And that's not, hey, we're not even talking about Daryl DK yet or Ricardo Pepi. There are plenty of strikers in this U.S. men's national team setup. Got to kind of worry about who's going to be filling those roles and who's going to be filling the roles of the wings as well. So we'll have to wait and see as this all gets shaked out. And honestly, the best question is going to be, can our manager correctly manage the team going forward? Or will we get another, playing time gate situation again? We'll have to wait and see.
Dare I say, is it potentially a chance to be looking forward to the U.S. men's chances in the World Cup coming up? Is it, dare I say, should we be optimistic about it?
I'm always optimistic. So yeah, so you're talking the wrong person here. I'm way too optimistic about their chances.
You know what? That makes a couple of us as well. The last couple of years have been a little shaky, but you know what? Maybe 2026 feels like the right year. Feels like the year they flip it around, and we got a few years to get there. So you know what? That's how we'll justify. We got a few years, and it's only looking up.
I'll be in person. I'll be watching the games in person. I've already set aside money for this. Like, I'm ready to go. Is it 2026 yet? Like, let's go.
Absolutely. You know, we all can't wait for it. So right now we're going to go ahead and round out the podcast, and just keeping with tradition, we've kind of, the last handful of weeks, we spent a couple of minutes, just a little bit of wellness, just a little bit of words for everybody as well too. And I just kind of wanted to keep it going one more time. Just wanted to make sure everyone is doing okay. Hopefully you all have spent a lot of time with those who you care about, talking with those that you love, treating them the way they want to be treated, and making sure that you can never ask too many questions. You can never ask, are they okay enough? Just make sure that you always check in on those who you care about. If they feel okay, you will feel okay. They might not want to tell you at first, but it doesn't mean that you can't just be there and be supportive. So that's kind of how I'll round it out. We'll keep this one nice, short, and sweet. Just always be supportive to those that you care about, and always keep them really close to you. You can never be too supportive. You can never be too caring. So that's how we're going to go ahead and round out this episode of the High-Low Sports Podcast. Hopefully you all agree. Hopefully you all enjoyed your 4th of July weekend and with all of your fingers intact. If you haven't, I apologize. I'll quit making the Jason Pierre-Paul jokes, and probably by the time our next show starts. So if you haven't checked it out on our YouTube channel, go check out Tier Tuesdays. We went over Heisman Trophy winners, so you'll definitely want to go check that out as well too. Let us know what we got right, what we got wrong. Either way, we appreciate you all for joining us here on this episode. We will see you